Okay, we'll get started. It's 1:45. Is it 1:45 or 1:45? 1:45. Okay. So, can I hand back over to you, Emily and David?
Do you want to talk through it?
No, you go.
So, just before you should have a piece of paper. So that's a piece of work that we did during the lunch break. So what you have at the top, the table at the top, so you've got the staff resolution as it reads at the moment. Under that, you've got the table that's in your council agenda at the moment, but we've added the top piece around government legislation and the anticipated move to minimum wage over the years. So you'll see here we've got the first 3 years, 21-22 is when we get to $20, plus we've just estimated a 3% increase on those rates for the final 2 years of this cleaning contract. So you'll see there that the total forecast cost for the contract will be, as proposed, 9.9 mil. In terms of, now you'll remember at the 10-year plan we talked about having a council minimum wage and we didn't.
So where's the 9.9 million? Sorry,
so the forecasted expenditure, so third line down in the first table. 9.912.
Just got it. Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
So you remember the 10-year plan, we went down the route of council minimum wage. That didn't go through the 10-year plan, but I suppose I'll just put on the table, we could call it that as something to index external contractors to, should elected members wish to establish a minimum rate for cleaners through this contract. We took a look at the actual impact on our numbers. The $200,000 that I mentioned is the impact in the first year, but as central government implement their minimum wage, the additional cost to us, we've already budgeted for that in our budget. So the impact in the second year is only $99,000 and nothing in the third year. So the total increase to this contract over the 5 years, if we were to establish a council minimum wage and to say let's set off at $20 for the as a minimum for cleaners, would be a $300,000 increase on the numbers you have in your report over the 5-year contract.
So how would we write this up as a resolution? Should we want to?
We could actually
test it?
We should put the resolution that we thought you might ask me to do up. If
Thank
you like.
So, it's like he's been told to do something behind the scenes.
Something we prepared earlier.
So we could alter the resolution in this current report to read that we will, with the remuneration of cleaning services staff to be aligned with, it should say A, sorry, Becca, can we change with to A, council minimum wage. And I've put as a minimum because there could be some cleaning staff that get paid more than this $20, right? So to not put as a minimum would mean that anyone who cleans for OCS could only get paid at $20. So that make sense?
Yeah.
So in the transition to the minimum wage through central government will impact us 200 in the first year and 100 in the second year and then nothing in the third because we've already budgeted for that transition in our and council's numbers. So the total impact on the contract would be $300,000 over the total of 5 years.
Over the total of 5 years.
Correct.
Average of 60 a year, but not evenly
Or
spread.
200, yeah, not evenly spread.
Okay, so Councillor Dave, are you happy to remove that?
Yeah, I'd like
No,
to move that,
I'll
thanks.
second that.
And just for a reference, we've had confirmation from the provider that they have the capability to pay staff on our contract at a different amount. So the mechanics are there. So this doesn't present a logistical issue for them because these staff may well be working on this job versus other jobs. So they already have some staff that work different jobs at different rates. And so this is not impractical for the provider.
Okay, so we'll go to questions, or should we go straight to debate? No, we have questions, so Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. So how do we ensure that the increase is applied to wages with them? How do we ensure that?
We can set up with the contractor, but we can get suitable reports to show that that is actually happening. So we'll have an auditable process so we can actually have that surety.
So the first point though, Emily, was it would actually be a requirement in the contract. So we'd actually contract them to do so, and as a consequence, there's contractual remedies if they don't pursue that, and we'll get reporting to support that decision as well.
Yeah, okay, because that would be a concern. I just have a couple of other questions on the report. Do you want me to do those now, or do you want to deal with this issue?
This issue is the
Okay,
whole paper, please.
They're fairly
Angela.
simple questions. So page 61.7, we're looking at getting improved services from this contract. And so what does dedicated on-site supervision mean in the first bullet point under 7 on page 61?
So at the moment, we share cleaning supervision with other sites or other clients of the contractor. So they might have a cleaning supervisor that will do our buildings, plus other buildings not owned by us in Hamilton, and may even go further afield to other towns and cities around Central North Island. Through this contract, we'll actually have someone sitting in our offices during the working week, so we can have actual fast resolution of issues. At the moment, we may not be able to get resolution in that day because we need to have the supervisor come and visit.
So that person is, it's an administrative posting, it's not a cleaner on site?
Correct.
Okay, do we have cleaners on site?
Yeah,
I know
generally,
we do some of our facilities, but...
so generally the supervisors also do cleaning as well, especially when they're short-staffed.
Yeah, okay. And just the last bullet point on the increased scope of works to address customer complaints. Are those complaints from our departments?
Yeah, so these are complaints that we've received over the years for public toilets, Waterworld and the Transportation Centre.
Okay, all right, okay.
Transportation.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Improved health and safety, so it's number 7, improved health and safety management. Do we have any influence on what kind of cleaning products they use, that they're non-toxic?
We're not experts, obviously, in cleaning products, but we, through the contract, we're requiring them to meet New Zealand legislation in terms of the products that they use and the chemicals that they use, and also the processes. Obviously, there's some chemicals that you can't mix with other chemicals, so we'll be using New Zealand legislation.
Okay, that's the standard. Okay, thank you. Not excited.
Deputy Mayor Marson.
Not meant to be a radical question. Tell us the advantages of us contracting out our cleaning versus an in-house service.
Cleaners is actually a profession. So if we were to set up our own cleaning service in-house, we would have to employ suitably trained people at the start, and they will then have to then on-train the cleaners themselves. Cleaners are generally in that vulnerable worker place, and they're quite transient. So as councillors know, with lifeguards, Lance's group has a lot of difficulty keeping up the numbers with lifeguards as they move to and from. So we'll have the same thing with cleaners as well. So there will be a significant amount of effort just to ensure that we have the minimum amount of cleaners at any one time.
I think another reason too, and those are two very good reasons, would be the fact that OCS is a national company in terms of the cost of tools and equipment to be able to do the job. They'll be able to do it far cheaper than we could.
What's their reputation as a good employer, and what's their interaction with the relevant unions like?
Was that part of the tender evaluation?
We didn't ask anything around interaction with unions, but
So can you just come to the mic? I can't. So, apologies to you, but yeah, just yeah.
He doesn't want to
Okay, it's not something that we actually assessed during the tender evaluation. They seem to have a good reputation, but it wasn't something that we actually questioned or had evidence based on as an employer, I'm afraid.
Because obviously, and what I, to our GM, we as a council are a good employer, aspire to be a good employer. We have our HR around that. But what I'm anxious with a major contract, what supervision would we do as part of our?
Okay, keep going.
What supervision in administering this contract are we going to do to ensure that this contractor is a good employer of their staff, because in essence they are our staff because they're doing work for us?
Through the contract, we're going to have monthly operational meetings and quarterly governance meetings. At this stage, there is no KPI in our KPIs that we presented in the contract that relates to this topic. But based on this conversation, we can actually negotiate with the contractor to put some KPIs in there so we can get that transparency that you're after.
And I think the other thing too is that we work close with all the activities around council, and our staff do have interactions with cleaners, and so they will be talking, and we will hear if there's any disquiet. So that will be another way, another filter for us to actually be bringing to those monthly meetings in terms of the quality of the culture.
Okay, so basically under health and safety legislation, we're still responsible for the safety and wellbeing of all staff, even those we contract with. And part of the safety and wellbeing legislation is the mental wellbeing of staff. So they're expected under the contract to positively assure us that they're meeting all the health and safety requirements. So it's legislatively bare minimum is that we need to be aware of this stuff. Over and above that, it will be the ongoing relationship through our account manager and the clean and our engagement with the staff. I mean, effectively what happens, you'll notice that, and despite the fact that you guys don't necessarily at all times work late hours in the office, but when you do, you will see the staff around.
We do.
And so the best way of managing the relationship is for us to have relationships with them as if they were staff. And we do that, and that means that we keep a really good close eye on how they're feeling, how they're performing. It goes two ways. It's a double-edged sword. We need to make sure they deliver what they need to do per the contract, but also we need to make sure the contractor delivers good, safe work environments for their staff as well.
Richard, as you're the only person we employ, absolutely, would you as a CE be minded to ensure that in terms of the broad corporate, there are things that our corporate staff are involved with, the corporate thing that we try and move them as close as possible, doing part of our sort of in-house staff as is reasonable?
I fully expect that they will get as much respect as our staff do.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. On page 62 of our agenda, at the very bottom, municipal buildings, there's an error is disclosed to us. Is that an annual? Is that an error that will compound times, because there's 9 years left in the 10-year plan? So is that $900,000 or is it $100,000 over the term?
Your first option there was correct. So I accidentally reduced the budget per annum by $100,000.
Sorry, I can't hear.
So when I was putting the budgets together for the 10-year plan, I accidentally reduced the budget by $100,000 per annum.
Per annum, okay. Okay, so David, or someone hopefully knows the answer to this. When and has that informed our financial reports and things?
No, it's not in the. It's not been brought to the finance committee yet because of this discussion. Once this discussion results in a decision from council, we'll bake that into the financial strategy, but we'll also bake it into the annual plan discussions that happen on the 21st of May. So you'll be able to see the impact of that.
So if I went back, so if I go to next week's finance committee meeting agenda and look at our balancing the books thing, it's shows a better position by $100,000 times 9 years in our
I haven't got the report in front of me, so I don't know if the team have captured that yet, but I'll confirm that with you.
But didn't you just say
after
it
this.
hasn't been put in? I
That's,
thought you
that's
just
right.
said that.
I haven't instructed them to put it in, but the
Okay.
team may have put it in, so I'll come back and confirm with you. $100,000 is a lot of money.
Correct.
But in terms of the balancing the books, it won't direct the impact of a different decision that gets made later today in terms of the proposals that have been presented. But what we're wanting to do is bundle up all the proposals and all the direction that council are giving staff so that on the 21st of May we can have an all-in situation and have the model there and we can work through that then.
Okay, thank you. And just the discussion we've just been going through about minimum wages and hiking them and whatnot. The resolution is not up there, but could you put the resolution up, please? Recommendation, I mean. That recommendation does that capture the discussion that Martin was having?
Yes, it does.
And so, just to be clear, before that discussion, you were asking us to approve
10.5 mil,
10.5 mil.
and now it's 10.8.
Okay, so that's the impact of what we've just done.
Yes.
So that 10.8 also includes the 100,000 error that we found here.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's the total sum.
That's correct. That's the
Okay.
total.
Okay. All right, and so what obligation do we have as an organisation to pay above minimum wages? I mean, we've got some sort of fiduciary duty, don't we, in terms of, I'm thinking in terms of a director of a public company, so, it's a little bit different, but I just want to know, are we supposed to look for the best option at the best cost, or is it okay for us to kind of...
It's a council decision above any legislative requirement.
Okay, so it's okay for us to spend more than we need to do to get the same output?
Yes.
That we're allowed to overspend?
Well, I'm not going to use the word overspend.
We are allowed to spend more than we have to get an output.
The local government act.
Areas.
No, I'm asking a question. Oh,
I can
sorry,
answer
your
this quite
point of order.
cleanly, Councillor Dave. I'll wait for ruling by the...
Go ahead.
So Local Government Act requires us to look at the broader, not just financial aspects. So as part of this, we need to look after our staff and our stakeholders in our community. So we've got to balance all those requirements, and that's what this decision today is effectively achieving, or not, depending which way you vote.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies, Dave, if you've just answered this with Gary's question, but in the financial considerations, it talks about a $3.2 million greater allowance than was budgeted with this adjustment, is that right? The 3.21 million?
Yeah, so if you look at the table above, you'll see where the budget is at 6.7 million, and prior to having this discussion, the report shows that it was 9.9 is what the full cost of cleaning, once we took into account things like the dedicated on-site supervision, et cetera, increased scope. So prior to this, so prior to our most recent discussion, the difference was 3.2 million. It will now be 3.5 million.
But there's no mention of its impact on debt to revenue or anything in this report?
No, but it will. But we'll have that conversation when we circle back round on the annual plan.
How can we then sort of sign off on this if we don't have that clarity?
It will be so the additional funds per year will make a difference, but it won't be a significant impact on our debt to revenue or our balance in the books.
Okay. This proposal assumes, I guess, that we have visibility of the tenderer's wage costs that make up the total cleaning costs. Is that right? Because I guess to Councillor Angela's point, how do we know that increase in, this budget is potentially going to be linked or locked towards wages?
And that's so Richard's response around locking it into the contract to ensure.
I actually think Councillor Hamilton's question is quite different, how do we know that it's not going to cost them $100,000 and they're going to be charging us $200,000 for that privilege? Was that your question? Because we can contractually achieve the minimum, a new minimum wage at $20 an hour or whatever it is. The challenge I've got is to the extent do we know, have we audited that $200,000 to know that it's robust and actually reflects, if we're going to pay them that amount, that that's actually the value we're going to receive.
But also, to your point, Richard, if I understood you correctly before, you said they've got the mechanism to incur this adjustment. So if they've already got that mechanism, why are we going to, over and above, increase the tender project?
So they've got the mechanism to pay it, but they program how much they pay. And at the moment, we're saying they're paying X amount. We're saying it's got to be a requirement of Y amount. So it's the tools there. This amount of additional $200,000 enables them to program that into their tool to actually pay their staff, which will then mean that we're going to have to pay them to remunerate their staff for that amount.
Just to help, when staff went out to put the contract out, it was quoted at the minimum wage. This council is proposing lifting that up to a higher level.
Isn't this potentially setting a precedent then, when we're lifting one contract, then we potentially have to look at all tenders, all contracts, all subcontracts to council and make an adjustment?
So so firstly, it sets a potential expectation based on that precedent to the market, Councillor Hamilton. It absolutely does. But the decision by which this council chooses to remunerate other contracts in the same way is your choice. So you're not passing a resolution today whereby you say going forward all contracts that we entered into will be negotiated to ensure all staff receive the new minimum wage. It's just going specifically in the application to this contract, but particularly given that there are low income earners in cleaning contracts. So that's, I think, effectively where Councillor Gallagher and the Mayor were coming from. We are setting an expectation in the market, that's where we sit. However, we're not doing it for all contracts. So when they roll over, for example, what's another low-paying contract that we have? Not many?
No, there isn't that many. Probably the next one is security, but generally security people do get paid over and above the minimum wage anyway.
Isn't this the role of a private enterprise when they put forward a tender to allow for contingency? Because every time the central government shifts the minimum wage, it's not going to be our duty to go to partner with these guys and adjust our 10-year plan forecasts to accommodate.
No, so
Helen, this isn't a question it's fair to ask of management. What you're being asked to consider today is whether you and your conscience and your political outlook is prepared to let people continue to work at the minimum wage when we know the government's moving that substantially over the next couple of years, or whether you would rather leave them where they are. So this is exactly what the vote's about, and this is why it's coming back to council.
Yeah, but respectively, if we do it on this one motion, we're potentially setting a precedent, and that's my concern.
So the contracts so the contract. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
So I mean, this contract has rolled over now and come back through council, and so we as elected members, staff hasn't driven this. Elected members have picked up on this contract coming through and asked staff to work some figures of what it would be to bring people up to where the new minimum wage is going to be once this new government gets to that level. So this is a conscience decision.
I get all of that.
And this isn't about going out and finding all the contracts we've already got out there that haven't rolled over and asking and readdressing those. As contracts come through, it'll be a choice of this council to choose whether they want to address this or not. In this case, because we know it's a cleaners union, and we know that
I didn't know it was a cleaners union because it wasn't in the report.
Because this is our cleaners, and we know they're on the minimum wage, it's one that's been picked up on. What was it a contract for somebody to look after our sewage plants? We wouldn't look at it because we know they're all on well above the minimum wage already.
But then next minute we'll be asking, what about the living wage? And I just, with respect to the potential, I just think it's setting. Yeah, I'll leave it for now.
I want to make it clear this is not driven by the living wage from my perspective. The living wage is politically driven by a political party, and I don't want a part of something that's been driven by a political party, but this is about, from my point of view...
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
The
okay, I'm
wage
getting
is
into
not
debate.
driven by a political party, and in fact, the political party you're referring to hasn't actually brought in the living wage. It's driven by an NGO, a private charitable organisation that's out there in the community, and they are the ones driving it, and they're pushing it to all parties.
Okay, apologies, it's just that every time anyone's ever approached me to talk about it, they've come out of a political tent with a political badge on, so that's why.
Political badge
that's
says
where I got off track.
living wage now.
Yeah, but on the other lapel is another badge. So that's why I've got confused, I'm sorry. Hang on, Councillor Rob.
Thank you. Look, I'm just a little bit, I say the word confused. I can't quite fathom out which 300,000 you're talking about in the 10.5 to the 10.8. Emily mentioned that you'd made an error of 100,000 in the 10-year plan. So if I take 3 years of that, that brings me to 10,800,000. And when I look at the printout you gave us after lunch, there's 299,000, which is, of course, this adjustment to the council minimum wage over 2 years. Should the figure actually be 11.1, or is that 10.8 the same as the 299,000, or is it separate to the 100,000 that was the error in the 10-year plan?
No, so the $100,000 error in 10-year plan has been included in the forecast expenditure. That adds up to the 9.9. So paragraph 18, you'll see the forecast expenditure.
Yep.
So the 200,000, the 300,000 difference between this report and what's in the recommendation on the board is taken into account.
Is that 299?
That's 299.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's clear now. Does the contract, in addition to the movement in wages, whether it's minimum or council minimum, does it include an annual CPI adjustment?
There's two parts to the contract. Majority of the costs are labour,
Yep.
so that's minimum wage, but there is a component of materials which is CPI adjusted annually.
Okay, so they're not double counting the CPI, which would include some labour content, in terms of any annual increase that they would get under that clause.
No, so we've separated the two out in our forecasting.
Okay. And just following on from Councillor Hamilton's discussion, because I had that also down about creating a precedent, and I know that we've got catering contracts and we've got a security contract, which I think is up for renewal pretty soon. Is it likely that if we do adopt the same approach, and I can't see why we wouldn't, given the flavour of the council sitting around this table, will we need to look at a rate adjustment, or will we be able to cover the increased costs of this wage content within the 3.8 margin that we've got in the 10-year, currently on an annual basis in the 10-year plan?
Yeah, so the answer to that is that, I mean, remembering the 3.8 isn't related to CPI, it's more around creating a surplus to repay debt. So, and looking at the financial strategy last time we took it to the annual plan meeting, there's enough debt headroom there. There was $40 million in the third year, I believe, from memory. So this would just be an increase that would be paid out of that debt capacity. So there'd be no impact on rates. In terms of the...
Not in the short term anyway?
No.
Okay.
So based on setting a precedent, as Richard said, each contract that comes up is entirely council's decision as to how you want to treat it. I think a lot of people do align cleaners with vulnerable workers, and in that genre you might see that differently, but it's entirely a council decision.
So it's just how many other contracts? I know we have a security contract and we have some catering, or does that reflect in terms of caterers who have contracts with us?
Yeah, we are.
Is that an automatic flow through, and are there other contracts that we would need to be considering, or considering a similar decision to the one that we're making today on the cleaners?
Well, as Emily's talked about, security is another contract. It's not as large as this one. There isn't any other large contract of this nature. There is Montana, of course, you can, but again, that's a decision that can be made when those contracts come up for renewal. And if Montana doesn't come up for 2 years, the central government's minimum wage will have already kicked in. So, my opinion is I don't see any extreme danger around what the Mayor's proposing, but it's based on council deciding whether that's what you want to do.
And does
bear in mind the, sorry, Councillor Rob, bear in mind that this contract has been rolled month by month since, for a number of years now. And so whilst we look at a cost increase that looks sizable, it's really, we're just meeting the market today, as well as having done a very in-depth review of cleaning services and levels of service around council activities to make sure that we are meeting public expectations. So if you like, some of this is a reset to current market cost, as well as the pieces around matching legislation with minimum wage and the Health and Safety at Work Act, as we all know, is increasingly putting more compliance cost on our organisation.
And does it create any relativity problems to staff who we might employ who might be in the same category as the cleaners?
I see it differently in the sense that this is an hourly rate. Cleaners don't work full-time, full council. There's it's a whole different remuneration package, and so.
But the hourly, okay. So you're suggesting that perhaps somebody who makes the tea here would be on a salary rather than an hourly rate?
We don't have anyone who makes the tea. I understand that's an example, but
sorry, I'm using that as an example. But
no, I think that the nature of the employment contract with our staff is very different to the employment contract with the cleaning staff that only work a certain number of hours a week.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, can I have a couple
I'll
more?
come back to you
Okay,
at the end. So just re-push so you're still on the list. Councillor Jeff.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. I think what's missing for me is...
just one thing I just want to get on the board is Councillor Gary's moving the staff recommendation, seconded by Councillor Ryan.
Is that an amendment?
That's the amendment, yes. Sorry, continue.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Look, in terms of... what I'm interested in is, given Councillor Hamilton's point about the precedent-setting nature of this, I'm not getting an answer on exactly what other contracts are out there to be rolled over in future and exactly what they're worth and exactly what it'll cost us. I'm getting a sort of how long is a piece of string answer. So what is the answer to that? What other contracts are out there and what will it cost us to do the same thing? What are we signing up for?
So the cleaning contract's unique because the majority of the cleaners are on minimum wage. The only other contract that I can think of that would be of similar nature with staff on minimum wage is the Montana catering contract. The next one...
Why are we so vague? Why don't we have facts and figures?
Because we were requested, we put forward a recommendation that we paid the New Zealand government minimum wage. At this meeting today, it was requested that we consider and move a recommendation to consider a higher minimum wage. This is not something that we were recommending as a staff recommendation, Councillor Taylor. So, to be fair, this is precedent setting to the extent that this council, as elected members, decide to continue with this decision to future contracts. You do not have to. We will not be challenged, or otherwise. So I know there's a moral inclination that if we pay one, we've got to pay the others. I'm not disputing that, Councillor Taylor, but I'm just saying that's effectively where we are. If council wishes to consider this as a bundle, and us bring back all the contracts that it impacts and have that conversation, that is another thing we can do as well. For us, getting this contract away from a monthly roll by roll is our goal at this point in time.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. That answers the question about the sort of vagueness. It doesn't satisfy me, I think, because I feel like we're being asked to make a decision with very little information. That's it from me.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. I just want to go back to David's response to one of Rob's questions, and I think it was Rob asked, the implication that this would affect our rates. And you said debt to revenue, blah, blah, blah. To the extent, by definition, just by maths, to the extent this increases our expenses and there is no commensurate increase in revenue,
Correct.
our surplus will be diminished and/or our deficit will be expanded.
Correct. Our debt repayment will be
Hang on,
reduced.
and then we want to get to a balance the book situation.
Yep.
The only way we can achieve that is by either finding some other costs to reduce, or all other things being equal, or increasing our rates. So there's a 50-50 chance we're going to have to increase our rates to get this thing to work.
No.
The answer is yes.
So no, if we go back to the 10-year plan, we wanted to everyday cost to match everyday revenues as quickly as possible, and then create surplus.
And this is an
repay
everyday
debt.
cost.
So, correct. And when we have a look at the last Finance Committee, or the last time we put the financial strategy on the table, there was significant headway we're making in terms of we're ahead of the game of a 10-year plan to repay, to balance our books. So this would eat into that, that benefit of being ahead of the 10-year plan. Yes, you are right. In terms of the key principle of everyday cost and everyday revenue, that we would not need to impact and increase rates, given what we currently know, to accommodate the cleaning contract as it is, or with the proposal that Mayor Andrews put on the table.
Put it this way, Councillor Millett, the outcome may well be that we have painted ourselves into a corner with at the 10-year plan conversation, or the annual plan conversation later today, whereby if we had other items that we wish to move, we may not have the capacity to do so. The point that the General Manager commented before is that whilst it's significant, it's not going to be materially impacting on our balanced books number.
That's correct, and also these will be...
So we're talking about materiality now.
I'm just giving you the facts.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to judge whether it's material or not. I'm just saying it's not going to push us into a deficit, is what the General Manager said earlier. Yes. Which I think is your concern.
No, my concern is that...
Hang on, we can save that for
yep,
debate.
yep.
Councillor Angela.
Thank you. Just, I'm just looking at the procurement on page 62, procurement discussion under point 10. Just from a high-level perspective, do we still follow the NZTA model on these non-attribute and price attributes and all of that stuff? It is the NZTA model, isn't it, that we... Is it Treasury?
Yeah, so they're the government guidelines for approaching these contracts. So we can do anything we like, to be honest, in terms of how we approach these. There's no legislative mandate, but we follow what is considered good practice from a central government perspective, which is the OAG's guidelines on procurement.
Yeah. Have we looked at this in terms of our, as an example, our new approach to rubbish and recycling? Like I noticed one of our non-price attribute weightings for sustainability is 2%. So that's basically how they deal with their rubbish. What's their strategy on that? And obviously, in this particular industry, there's a fair bit of impact there. So, have we looked? Is it time to review our procurement policy on this, to line it up with some of our strategies?
Can I jump in here? Good, I will. I'm the boss. Hey, so one of the things that we've been investigating, and yes, so the short answer is yes, not necessarily for this contract. I think there are some smart initiatives that can be brought to bear for cleaning contracts, and it also covers off the points raised by Councillor Henry in terms of the type of chemicals that are used and so forth. The other aspect that Igor, our very good procurement manager, is also leading is looking at social procurement as well, in terms of the extent to which we can actually enter into social procurement. Now, the challenge you have with social procurement is the extent to which you can balance the cost up versus those social outcomes. But what we're also looking at is there are some philanthropic groups out there that are willing to match the gap between what would be the market at a competitive rate versus the market at the social rate, to ensure that entities such as government agencies can achieve their social outcomes but not actually cost the ratepayer more. So Eagle is also looking at that. So once we gather the information together, we'll bring that back to council and actually with the view to adopt a social procurement plan, rather than just individually focusing on what is quite a broad set of metrics but not necessarily all of them.
Yeah, excellent answer. Thank you.
I was preparing that. Thanks for warning me beforehand.
Okay, so we're going to debate. So I'll be going to councillor Mallett after I've spoken, and the mover of the, sorry?
Speak for a while, because I'm just taking some notes now.
Oh, sorry, I totally apologise. Far away.
And you jump in ahead of me, jeez.
Order. Don't be disrespectful.
Thank you. Look, as far as I'm concerned, this is a question about fairness and about responsibility. We've heard the financial arguments, and I'm going to address them, but I think when you look at what the minimum wage is, even after Monday, where it went up by $1.70, it's still pathetic. $1.20, sorry, it's still pathetic. It's not enough for people to live on. There's an argument about what level is enough for people to live on, but I defy anyone to say that $17.70 is a livable per hour is a livable wage, especially given that most cleaners are on part-time or casual work and often have to work as cleaners in very unsatisfactory hours, late at night, by themselves, and still get paid the minimum wage. I think we have a responsibility as a leading employer in the city, a leading enterprise, to actually ensure that people are getting a fair rate for the work. These might be contractors or staff of contractors, but to all intents and purposes, they're our employees, just via a contract for services rather than an employment contract. All that we're doing is going slightly ahead of the move that central government and the rest of the community are looking at anyway. In fact, behind some parts of the community which have brought this in. I hear Ryan, for instance, talk about private enterprise as though being concerned about this, and isn't this the job of private enterprise? I actually think we're helping private enterprise in this circumstance. We're ensuring that their employees are paid at a fair rate. I think that's going to make employment as a cleaner with the OCS company a more attractive place to work for. They'll have less staff turnover. There'll be a number of other positives that are more work satisfaction that arise as a result of that. So I don't think it should always be looked at as a negative for private enterprise. Rob asked about relativity with HCC, with the person who makes his tea, I think he was referring to. It's, the fact is we're not trying to lift them above what HCC pays its staff. We're making them equal to by passing this motion. So the relativity is not an issue, I don't believe. There's a lot of scaremongery about this. A few years ago, we brought in a policy in this council relating to tenders called Buy New Zealand or Buy Local, and people said, oh, if you force them to buy local rather than the cheapest price, it's going to cost the ratepayers more. Well, maybe it cost the ratepayers a few cents more, but it actually helped local businesses, local enterprises by doing that, having that policy. And a lot of other councils around the country started doing the same thing. We're about the second or third to do that, I think, after Nelson and Christchurch. This is of a similar vein. It is a precedent, but it's not a bad precedent. It's actually a good precedent. If our workers in that area get a bit of an increase, I think that's a good thing. I think it's good that others might follow as a result. We haven't got too many others that will be in that thing. The last thing I want to say, just thinking about the cash amount, over the life of this contract, that $300,000 works out at $1 per rateable property per year. That's how much is being asked for here. That's the cost, $1 per rateable property per year.
Wait for Siggy. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to talk about the environmentally friendly products that we might use. We are leaders in the city, and I think it's...
Hang on, it's off topic.
Is that really? But we are looking at a contract.
I'll let it go, but don't, it's not, this is about the contract, not about the products that are being used.
But it's got something to do with the workers as well, and we're looking at health and safety for the workers.
Well, as we came back and have looked at the wage, you could have come back and asked about the products, but you didn't. So I'll let you go, but I'm just saying you really are out of scope, okay? But I'll let you go just because I know that this is really important to you. But you are out of scope, okay?
Okay, Thank you. Well, I did ask before, and you confirmed that you're going under the EPA standard, and that's fine. But I have slight challenges with the EPA standard, and they take years to figure out what a toxin actually really is. So as a leader, as I said, we need to really be looking after our staff, because it's not just about that. We can give them a little bit more money, but if we allow them to use highly toxic products, that's not good for their health. And I'm just looking at improved health and safety management, and that's really important. We're looking after that. So I think that comes together with giving them an increase in their wages as well. So if we have an influence on that, I would just love to explore that a bit further. Maybe not at this point, but maybe in the future, because we are also using some of these premises where these products have been used. And I'm the proverbial canary that falls over when there's too many toxins around the place, and I'm already sniffling here. And so I'm always looking for ways of making our environment a little bit more healthy. And it's not just for me, but it's for everybody else as well. So I actually want to keep people alive. So that's my whole mandate. So thank you so much for the minute you gave me.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. At this meeting, we have missed an opportunity to save ratepayers $800,000 to $900,000 a year with the eyesight decision. We're about to do some damage to the ratepayers by the CBD parking decision, which I assume will not get passed. We are going to approve remissions to CBD development contributions, which over the last 5 years have cost ratepayers about $7 million. And we are now about to increase the rate with the costs of the operation by another $300,000 when those things are not required. Now, Dave, God bless him, thinks he knows how to run a business, and thinks that the owners of these businesses should be pleased that we are demanding they increase the wages for their cleaners. I'm pretty sure they would make that decision themselves if they thought that was the right thing to do. We have no greater obligation than to follow the law and to represent our ratepayers and residents as honestly and as decently as we can. About 7-8 years ago, Julie Hardacre came to the Mayoralty, and she whacked in a whopping great 9% rate increase. She then put in, her council put in then 3.8% rate increases, and they were going to keep balancing the books. They were going to use the surpluses to pay down debt. What happened? Dear old Andrew got into the Mayoralty, and he had to put in a 9.7% rate increase and a 3.8% rate increase going on from there. We are making the same stupid mistakes over and over and over again, and this one is an absolute shocker because it's not required, it's not illegal what we're doing. The staff have recommended it, not that that's always the best recommendation for something, but there is no reason to suggest that any ratepayer or the level of service that we provide in our facilities will be improved at all by this. This is just a gratuitous spending of ratepayers' money. It's completely out of line, and all we are going to do, the next mayor, I don't know who it's going to be, is going to be faced with another 9.7% rate increase, but that'll be the last one. That'll be the last one. Guys, this is just deja vu. Over and over and over again. Thank you.
Councillor Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. That's the best I've heard from Gary in a long time. That was really good. Look, whilst I sympathise with the mover and seconder of the motion, I struggle with the process of it in that I don't think it should be hung on this one report. We've got another contract which wasn't mentioned. We've signed off on the 10-year plan, 11-year plan, was Enviro Waste at $97 million. And they'll have a lot of potentially vulnerable workers dipping rubbish into trucks and whatnot. Imagine if we tinker with that contract, the impact that will have. We've already had our existing waste contractor come back to us wanting a bump in wages, and they're on the out in 12 months, and we pushed back on that. Yet here we are proactively saying, let's give these guys a pay raise. It's nonsensical to me. And whilst I respect the conversation around wage appropriateness and living wage and all that conversation, I think that's a 10-year plan conversation. We've got to make that decision in terms of the culture of council and not make that decision on the back of one contract.
Deputy Mayor Marson.
Yeah, this is a 5-year contract, and you can take the cost-cutting arguments to the extreme, and you can say shift your call centre to Manila, and as one council didn't even tell the councillors that was happening. Go extreme in another 10 years, our governance manager can be a virtual reality, three-dimensional figure beaming in from Bombay or Manila or wherever. Save yourself money because you'll be subject to the labour conditions in those countries. Don't think it's a particularly good idea. I think I regard, and I acknowledge Councillor Ryan around the Enviro Waste, his point, but I regard our cleaners as an integral part of our staff team. They work for us. Many of them work at very unsociable hours, and with respect to Councillor Mallett's argument to suggest that some poorly paid nighttime cleaner working unsocial hours is going to be solely responsible for a 9.7% rate increase when we're increasing the contract for, was it 300 over how many years?
I did not say that at all, and you know that.
Continue, Deputy
In
Mayor.
fact, I listed a number of things.
Gary,
Okay.
stop. Point taken. Continue, Deputy Mayor.
I always love to be somewhat colourful in my debate because I'm trying to paint a sincere picture. And the sincere picture is this: we should be a good employer, and where humanly possible, the people who contract for us should be treated fairly and with respect. I personally regard our cleaning staff as an integral part of the council operation. I've been assured by staff the better way to go is, rather than in-house, we do contract out because of the expertise, etc., of the company. Obviously, the living wage is, or minimum wage as we must call it, as I understand it, this is consistent with the resolution council paid for its in-house staff in terms of movement of that so-called minimum wage. I also make the point that ultimately a wage circulates in the community, circulates in the local economy. There's a broader picture in my view. But ultimately, as a good employer, as a board of the good employer, which we work through Richard, I like the thought that hard-working, good Kiwis who do a hard day's work or night's work and have an opportunity, and obviously in many cases have families to raise, kids to feed, perhaps their kids can also go to the school camps. Perhaps their kids can be out of the poverty zone. Perhaps their kids can enjoy the same opportunities as the children of our in-house staff. In other words, are we a fair employer? Are we a good employer? Are we a fair organisation and a good organisation? So that's why I'll be supporting the motion.
Councillor Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Andrew. Look, I'm grappling with this because I have sympathy for what you're trying to do. I have sympathy for it. I'm disappointed at the lack of detail. I feel that I don't feel that I can make a decision supporting it. If I had a report in front of me that showed me 6 more contracts that are going to roll over in the next couple of years, how many contractors were involved, what it was likely to cost us, then I might feel ready to make a decision, but I don't. And I find myself asking, look, why are we being so generous with other people's money? I differ from Councillor Mallett and some of the things he pointed to, because I do think I think some of those costs are worthwhile. That's fine, but I mean, essentially we're overpaying a contractor on a matter of principle. because that's what we're doing. We're paying them more than they need to be paid. And I haven't got the information here that allows me to support us making that move. If someone wants to bring it back and give us some more detail on what precedents we're setting, then I might go along with it. But at this stage, I'm not.
Perfect timing, Mr. Mark. I'll just give you time to sit down and settle in. Don't have to tell him that he knows the rules, he doesn't need to be reminded. Okay, they clean my floors. They empty my rubbish tin. And they clean the toilet that I use. This group of people are vulnerable employees. We as councillors are in a position of privilege, and we're probably earning on average about $70 an hour. But we're not in a position of privilege to take for ourselves. But to clearly say that this is not good enough. We do have empathy, and we will do what's right. Councillor Dave, would you like your right of reply?
Gary talked about the tender process and cleaning companies forcing wages up and that. I would say that it's exactly the opposite happened. Our tender system at the moment currently forces cleaning companies, in this instance, to offer only the minimum wage because they know their competitors will be doing the same, and it's a race to the bottom. The minimum becomes a maximum, and that's what actually happens at the moment. If we insert our policy into here by saying, what's your price paying a fair wage, then I think we get a much fairer outcome, and in actual fact the other tenderers in future will have to compete with that. That's one thing. As far as the process goes, Ryan's worried about the process of this coming here. I'm annoyed at the process too, because I think a report coming to us, given that we have now got a Hamilton City Council minimum wage that's significantly higher than what the old one was, that issue should have been addressed in the staff report. I would have liked the figures you want, Jeff and Ryan, to have been in this report right from the start, the other cases and so forth. Then it would have been easier to make a decision. I was surprised when I got the report and didn't even to refer to that issue at all, even though we've been debating that issue for some time in council. Nevertheless, the problem is that we've got a one-off opportunity now. It's no good, Ryan, saying this is an LTP decision. You're right in every normal sense of the word, but this is a 5-year decision we're making there. When we come to the LTP in a year and a half, we can't go back and revisit this. We've got to visit it now. We've got to make a decision now. I don't like making ad hoc decisions. I would rather that every time we get a tender proposal put in front of us, that we get given the option that if you want to follow the Hamilton minimum wage, Hamilton City Council minimum wage policy, this is what the cost will be on that particular tender. But we haven't been put in that position yet, so we're having to do them one by one. And given that, I think, look at this situation. This is the largest group of low-paid workers left under council's umbrella. Forget whether they're contractors or direct employees. They're under our umbrella. We have a responsibility in that area. We don't have the choice well, I don't believe we should have the choice of saying, let's kick it off for more discussion later on in the LTP. That is unrealistic for this group of workers. If we can, I would agree with that, but we can't. This contract's being issued now for 5 years. That's it for 5 years for this group. Are we going to say you're stuck on the minimum wage for 5 years? I think that's not a good idea. I don't think that's being a good employer. The precedent that we create is not going to break the bank, and I think it's a good precedent.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote. So we're voting on the amendments of Councillor Gary and Councillor Hamilton. No, excuse me, you don't have to talk, you know the rules. You can choose whether you participate or not. You can go either way.
Councillor Bunting, if you're choosing not to vote, you need to take your card in, just leave the tapes. Thank you.
You can stay Councillor Mark, you can stay at the table, just,
No, just have to take your cards out.
Take your card out.
okay, so we're going to the board to vote. And we're voting on the amendment first by Gary and councillor Hamilton.
The amendment is equal.
I'll be delighted to use my casting vote. We'll now go to the motion.
So the motion, the amendment is declared lost with the casting vote of the chair.
So let's, Andrew, for the record, can you clarify how you were exercising your casting vote, please?
The same way as I made my first vote. So we're now going to the motion.
The motion is carried, 7 for, 5 against.
That means oh, well, look at that. I try not to undo.
I'm just wondering, through you,
Mayor Andrew.
Mr. Your Worship,
Mayor Andrew's fine.
Your
not the
Worship,
worship.
Your Worship, Andrew.
Not the W word.
he doesn't like.
Worship.
Your Worship, yeah. Look, is it possible to ask through you to the Chief Executive and the GM that with future, without doing a motion, that with future tenders we get an option as part of the report so we can consider that issue, not a recommendation one way or other necessarily, well they can recommend what they like, but the figures are in there for future tenders.
I will do that through the worship.
Thank you.
So, just to be clear, what are we asking now? The staff always jack up rates in proposals.
And facts be presented if people want to do that.
We give you the option with all the information should you choose.
So you give us a line that are jacked up prices and some ones that are
Excuse me,
market prices.
councillor. No, no. Okay, so we're moving on to item 9, page 64.
Thank you, councillors. I'll take the report as read. This is about fees and charges that are proposed for the year 2 of the 10-year plan. It's been brought to this council meeting so that we can get some decisions, so that we can make our time constraints around certain fees and charges that need to be active as of 1 July, and that's around things like dog control registrations, etc., etc. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, I'll move, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, councillor Angela.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Page 67, under electronic data management, the 2/3 of the way down, there's a green line. Value of work less than $20,000. So there's two new fees there. What's that about?
Councillor, I can confirm that what that means is that within the building control area, that we won't charge an electronic data management fee where the value of the work being done is less than $20,000.
Okay, is that the rationale is because of the value of the work being done, but also electronic fee is simply staff time sitting there. We're not producing hard copies.
No, the rationale is that lines up with what brands in the government and other councils are doing.
Oh, okay, there we go. All right, thank you. Second question, page 88. There's a new fee there, event road closure advertising. Now, I know we've had this conversation before. Is it still the case that we are required under legislation to advertise through a newspaper and only a newspaper? Whose is that one?
So I can answer that to the chair. Yes, it is. So we're needing to put in advertising, so through the newspaper channels, which we try and use. The local, I think the Hamilton Press is the current location. I
And
can
that-
confirm that with Sean.
And that's $550.
For 2 advertisements, because we have to do it twice, yes.
That's what it costs.
So will this, will this then, oh no, maybe I have an amendment, Mayor Andrew. No, hang on, I've got a question. How many of these do we do a year, roughly? Well, actually, you might know.
I don't have that level of detail, but I can find out and send that through to you.
It varies is a good answer.
It does vary.
But between, like, are we talking about a dozen road closures a year for events, or are we talking about 3?
It would be under 20 at least. Yeah. So this is at our discretion. So should it be a charitable, or if it's so this fee and charges for profit making, and won't be charged to not for profit. Is my understanding.
Therefore, I don't have an amendment. Thank you for that answer.
Councillor Siggy.
I've lost mine. Thank you. On page 68, discontinued fee for eco workshops and eco home consultations, and I'm just wondering, to Jen, has that been taken over by Go Eco, or is anybody doing that, the home consultations? Because there was a
No.
talk about that.
No, I mean, that, in terms of the service that we were providing, that service has been discontinued, as you know.
Okay,
and that service, the same service has not been picked up by other people, but I'm happy to have a conversation with you on side in terms of where we've got to with our conversations with Go Eco on it.
That would be lovely. Thank
no
you.
problem.
Awesome.
Councillor Leo.
Yeah, I wonder if somebody could tell me why we have a $225 fee to adopt a dog. Surely we're taking the dog off council's hands. It's not going to cost council anything to keep them here at a sustenance fee of $19 per day. I would have thought somebody adopting a dog would be doing us a favour, and you would charge them $225 for it. Anybody, any ideas?
So there are costs involved in adopting a dog in terms of desexing and the vaccinations and immunisations and things that they need to have. And chipping.
Yeah, but that's a separate issue again. You've got an annual cost here for desexing the dog, and you've got a $25 fee for microchipping. So that doesn't really add up. No.
It's a one-off.
Just a one-off.
Well, you failed the first one, didn't you?
Councillor, I can get you the exact answer from my dog control people, but
Okay.
I was under the impression that those were all the costs of that actual process.
And then talking about dogs further, more than 2 dogs, $85 inspection fee, okay? And I know they come around and you look at your property to see if it's capable of carrying more than 2 dogs. And then they charge you an annual fee of $40, and you never see them again. Why would the annual fee, renewal fee, be for $40?
Again, I don't have that level of detail, but I will find
No,
out.
I just wondered because I've probably got an interest in this area.
Yep, so
I'll find out and come back to you.
occasionally so basically the individual fees are there for individual purposes, so I'm just Googling it in the University of Google. So you pay that adoption fee, that's if you're adopting a dog, but if we pick up a stray dog that we decide that needs to be fixed for whatever reason, we will fix it and charge the owner. If we have to vaccinate it, if we have to chip it, that'll be an individual charge, and it might not necessarily an adoption situation, might be actually controlling a menacing dog and putting it back to the owner as well. So there are sub-parts that. That's the bundle fee, according to the website, and the other stuff is individual charges should we do that to an existing owner. So they're not incremental, Councillor Tooman.
But why should the new owner have to pay that?
Well, if they want a dog, it's commercial prices. If you get a dog from a pet shop, why should the ratepayer pay for a dog? I mean, we're cheaper, to be fair, and Elton, don't take this as my intent, just to put the dog down if that's the case, but our job is to rehome. People want to get dogs, they should pay for the cost of actually looking after them, not the ratepayer. That's the burden of owning a dog.
I realise that. But Like, well, what about the annual renewal fee if you've got more than 2 dogs? What do you do to earn your $40? Nothing.
I will find out that detail and come back to you as soon as possible.
Okay.
Oh, to Google it.
Do you want to say anything or not? I'll let you if you want to. Just if it might help you, Councillor Leo, someone has done a bit of research on this that's sitting reasonably close to me, and part of it is also to ensure that dogs just aren't given away for free to people who don't have the means or who wouldn't have, by giving it away for free, it would appear it would have little or no value. So it's also about a sense of value to a degree, but as Jen says, she's going to distribute a report on this from the appropriate people. So thank you, Jen. Councillor Robb.
Follow on from the event road closure advertising. I take it that fee is just for the advertising. Do we charge for the other costs associated with closing down roads? And I'm thinking here of, say, the Sevens event, where we closed down a number of roads around the stadium for the Sevens. Do we on-charge that to the promoter or the organiser?
Through the chair, my understanding is yes, we do.
And how do we don't have fixed charges for that? We charge it on the basis of cost of what it costs us for security and the signs and so forth. Is that?
Yes, it's part of the contract for that event.
Okay. So that doesn't appear in here, but it is just an on market charge.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So when we're, and just a general question about all of these, and I guess the response back to Councillor Leo might have partially answered this, are we proactive in how we set our fees and charges? You know, are we looking for opportunities to charge where the market says we should be charging more or less than what we are charging? And are there services out there that we're not charging for that we should be? Are we doing an annual review to pick up on?
So we do it. We do an annual review. We do a deep dive with each group, with and as part of reimagining local government, there'll be some attention put towards what costs is council currently incurring that need to be on charge to others that are driving those costs in alignment with our guiding financial principles. So, constant work be done in that area, as you can see with the changes of the fees in this report.
So we do that by checking out to see what other local government authorities are charging and what might be new on the scene that wasn't there before?
That's all part of it, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor James.
Mayor Andrew, I actually, just following on from Councillor Robb's question there on page 88 for event road closure. So I just want to get this right. So we haven't charged before, like the likes of the Chiefs or Northern Districts Cricket, when we get roads shut down on Seddon and Mill and everything else in Willoughby for events?
My understanding is that's all done through the contractual arrangements. So they are charged, but these ones are for individual events that have not been passed on to applicants, and I'm just trying to get that information confirmed at the moment in terms of the detail.
So like marathons and bike races and everything else? Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Sorry to go back to the dogs, but just the logic of charging for the, I think Leo said it was 2 dogs on a single property. Shouldn't that just be a one-off charge unless the person moves properties?
So no, the first inspection is quite a detailed inspection where they have a look at the whole setup. Yep. And then the renewal fee, Councillor Leo, to answer your question, is just to go back and make sure that nothing has changed. So it's, I guess, inspection, not as full an inspection because they've done the full initial setup inspection, and it's just a renewal check that makes sure that everything's still fine.
But it's only charged on a more than one dog property, is it?
That's right. And then the answer to your other question about the adoption fees is my initial answer in terms of it covers the cost of desexing, chipping, immunisations and all the vaccinations and things that they need.
Be nice to see them for the $40.
Pardon me?
Be nice to see them for your $40. They never come back. Do one, that's it.
My understanding is they do the other ones.
I've never seen them.
You've got 2 dogs, is it?
Okay, so we're now moving to debate. Sorry, was some more questions? Councillor Leo?
On page 69, just about at the top there, I noticed we... is that the one? Yeah. I noticed that we charge $110 for a newspaper box, which I presume is on the footpath, and yet we only charge $25 for a table and chairs out there. It'll be far cheaper to actually operate your cafe on the footpath than it would be to rent premises in the city. Anybody can tell me why such a huge difference between a newspaper box and table and chairs? I'm on page 69, towards the top. It just seems to be out of kilter to me.
I'm sorry to say, Councillor, I don't have that level of detail either, but I will find that one out for you too.
Okay. Finished, Councillor Leo? Okay, so we're moving to debate. There is no debate. We'll move to the vote.
Councillor Bunting? Councillor Bunting, have you voted?
You can
Motion
push it
is
the first
carried
time, but not the
unanimously.
second time, mate. Apologies, you can just get read it again, sorry.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Okay, so we're now moving to item 10 on page 97. So it's moved by Councillor Jeff and seconded by... Jeff, who do you want to second it? Who? Yes. Sorry, apologies. Dave, who are you? Okay. I think it's appropriate that Councillor Dave moves in a few seconds. Thank you. Okay, can I ask you to talk to this if you want to, Councillor Dave?
Do we need to? We've debated
you
it
don't.
pretty heavily the other day.
No, okay. So we'll go straight to the board to vote. Okay, debate, Councillor Robb.
Look, I wish to speak in debate on this simply to dispel any misunderstanding in Councillor Taylor's right of reply at the G&I meeting last week. There was much arrow around Councillor Taylor in the G&I meeting last week, and that perhaps gave him courage to question my comments around the financial statements provided by staff in the report relating to the cost of free parking. Councillor Taylor said, "I am a little bit irked somehow internal charges contribute to $2 million. Struggle with it being more than $1 to $1.3 million. There are no internal charges reflected in the staff financial report, and any suggestion of this is quite wrong. The facts are quite clear in that financial report. In 2016-17, the surplus was $1.55 million, and in 18-19, 2 years later, the expected loss is $591,000. So the total change is $2.14 million. If we were to recover that $2.14 million in rates, it would represent a 1.27% increase in rates across the city. Last year, we increased rates by 9.7%, on the understanding that this would help us balance our financial statements in meeting our day-to-day expenditure. Free parking at the cost of $2 million a year is one of those costs. And the cost of the free parking to the average residential ratepayer who is paying $2,400 per annum is around $32.80 per property. So it's not free parking for Hamilton City ratepayers, and therefore it's quite wrong to have it advertised on a council candidate's motor car that there is free parking in the city. But take note, Deputy Mayor, it is free parking for Tamahiri residents.
Yes.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. And following up what Rob said, and thank you, Rob, for doing that little calculation, that 1.275% that is funding the free parking, and it is free parking, it's just not paid for by the parker. So, I mean, be accurate, but I understand your sentiments, Rob. That is a third of the 3.8% rate increase. So we could, if all other things being equal, if we pulled the free parking for 2 hours in the CBD, would be able to reduce our rate increase by 33%. So that puts it into perspective. The other thing that I've found looking through the figures is that the parking expenses under the free parking regime have gone up by almost $1 million per annum, by about 54%. You know, that's whacking. You know, God knows where the heck that comes from. Jeff, do you know where that comes from? Or sorry, staff. I should be asking staff.
We are.
Pardon?
We are in debate.
Oh, okay, all right. So that is an unconscionable increase in expenses. Yeah, so it just adds further to the reason that I don't think we should continue on with the 2 hour free parking, that the 2 hour free parking should be ended, and that the increased revenue that we would accrue because of the additional parking fees would be used to reduce the next year's 3.8% rates increase. By a third, in fact. By a third.
Councillor Mark.
I wasn't going to go here again, but I will go here again. I disagree with Councillor Pascoe's original premise that this is a cost of $2 million. There are a couple of little flies in that ointment of that argument. One is that it's not our money by right to charge people $2 an hour in a motley old parking system in only the CBD. To my mind, that was an erroneous charge. It was charged wrongly, and it could be suggested it was overcharged. The assumption is there is space there. We were charging rent for that space for people to park their car in it for $2 an hour after 3 and before 9 in the morning. The system wasn't working, and to my mind also, it just seemed a little bit wrong that we were in fact penalising the CBD and not charging anywhere else in town. I won't get into this, you know, you guys are far better than I am with the jiggery-pokery of all the numbers. But I think we've got to be thinking of this as, the other fly in the ointment is, if we had kept it, you're making a wild assumption here, Rob and Gary, that if we kept it at exactly the same, it still would have brought the same amount of money in. Figures were showing that that place was dying a natural slow death. This, as we've said, isn't the only thing that's turned it around, but I would be bold enough to say that we wouldn't be making $2 million a year had we kept the old system. Anyway, I think that was going anyway, so we had to do something.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Thank you. Didn't think we were coming back here, but we are. That's fine. Cast your mind back to when we made this call to bring in 2 hours free. The plan was, the idea was to revitalise the CBD, to change perceptions about parking in the CBD, which were negative, to change perceptions about the CBD as a whole. The figures show how well it's worked, as I said the other day, but I'll repeat myself. October 2017, average occupancy in the CBD was 69%. Now it's 84% average. Retailers love it. More than 90% want it to continue. You heard Mike Neal sit in that seat on Tuesday and say it's one of the factors behind the CBD's revitalisation. Shoppers love it. I'll love to see their reaction when you take it away. I've had 200 to 300 people approach me in the street over the last year or so and say, thank you so much for introducing free parking into the CBD. We love it. We don't just like it, we love it. As I said on Friday, we are embarking on a citywide parking management strategy, which is going to give us a lot of information across all the precincts, how they work together. We're going to come back in June 2020 with all that information and look at what changes, if any, we need to make with new technology if it's available. So in the meantime, would you have us go back to that ridiculous system that you had in place before 9 and after 3, where you split the CBD into half, and for half of it you have before 9 and after 3, and for the other half you're feeding your meters all day with $2 coins that are non-existent in your pocket? Would you really want to go back to that system and take ratepayers and residents back to that sort of confusion? You know how long it's taken to get them used to this system, and you want to go back to that? So I'm very proud of the system, and I actually think you are severely misjudging how Hamilton people feel about it if you're suggesting that we get rid of it.
Look, I do really have to applaud Councillor Taylor. He has done some hard work here with the Central City parking. The only thing with that, it would have made it more palatable for me, so I think it was $110 per store for the Central City parking scheme. It would have made it a little bit more palatable for me if we would have got it across the line last week to increase that number up a little bit per store. Now, it was said that there are quite a few small boutique and family-owned stores in the Central City, which is true, but at the likes of Chartwell Square and the base, their stores are charged around about $2 a day for parking in their rental schemes. So, you know, that's around about, and they pay for each day, so that's $730 per year each store for parking. And that obviously that gets offloaded to the shoppers quite a bit. So look, and a few of those stores quite a few of those stores at Chartwell and the base are also small family-owned stores. Just that I would have liked to have seen the Central City business people just pay a little bit more for their parking, which would have made it a little bit more palatable for me. Thank you.
Councillor Martin, sorry, apologies, Deputy Mayor Martin.
Oh. Happy with either. We have a partnership with the Central City Business Association, and I respect on things like DCs. I individually may not quite see eye to eye with them at this point, but I do see eye to eye with them in terms of them wanting to encourage shoppers and customers into using and patronising the businesses, and I do see this as one way of revitalising the CBD and having a level playing field in terms of Chartwell, the base, CBD and other shopping centres. In this moment, I'm prepared to be absolutely generous to my good multi-millionaire friends in Tamahiri, because what I would like to encourage is our multi-millionaire friends of Tamahiri to come and shop in the city and for their cash to circulate. And if this is one way of incentivising them, then I'm more than happy in this case to offer something of a freebie, as we would say, because obviously we want a vital CBD, and that is, in my view, really good for our city's economy. So I do think this issue transcends a narrow sort of positive and negative accounting aspect. It does really come back to how do we revitalise our CBD and how do we maximise the attractiveness of that area to people who are going to spend and use the services and patronise the shops.
Councillor Leo.
Yeah, I think we're actually confusing the public out there at the present time. We as a council are saying we've got major congestion issues here in the city. We're trying to get people onto our public transport system, which is underutilised. We're trying to get people onto cycles, and we're trying to get people walking. But what we're saying to them, hey, don't worry about all that. Just drive your car into town because you're going to park for free. So I think it's a wrong message which is going out there. Councillor Bunting refers to the old parking system which we had. Sure, they're outdated and they're a good collector's item as some of the parking meters. There's no two ways about that. But that is not really the issue. That will be eventually replaced, but free parking is not the reason for that. Yeah, I'm just a bit concerned that Access Hamilton is trying to do all this work with your cycling and your walking and your busing and all that sort of stuff, and yet at the same time we're saying, don't worry about that, guys, because you've got 2 hours free parking in Hamilton. So it's a big confusion for me.
I'll just take the opportunity. I do agree to a degree with what Councillor James said about increasing the amount that the central, that beneficiaries of it in the city pay, and I thought that Councillor Robb's motion earlier this week or last week was quite appropriate. But I also asked Councillor Robb to remove the trial part of his motion, and I would have supported it. I just happened to be sitting next to him. I believe that the parking meters still sitting there are confusing, and I believe that the reason we keep calling this a trial is to just keep it in the system. And I think it's time we actually removed the trial and made this a permanent thing. And if that comes back, I would consider again what Rob proposed, but not while it's still a trial. If we're taking it from the trial into a permanent, where it is going forward, I'm not comfortable with that still being a trial, because what you're doing is you're upping the costs to the users while still saying, but we're still trialling it. Well, what does that mean? It's coming back again in another 6 months' time to consider upping it again or removing it, or not aware. And so I would like to see this locked down and the word trial be removed from the whole process. Also, I want to remind members that there is an election coming up, and if we remove this free parking now, this isn't about saving your seats, but people absolutely have just bedded into this and are a part of this and are using this and appreciate it. And to remove it now, or to vote this down, I just think you need to think pretty carefully. If this got voted down today, I think it would be disastrous for this council, leading into the position that the public are in of making a decision in the next few months. Councillor Paula, you've sneaked on there.
Well, I have, because I need just to respond to a couple of things that have just been said in other people's debate. Thank you, Mayor Andrew. The reason I supported it the way I did last week is precisely because it is still part of that trial. And I've been quite honest with the working party and had good conversations. I want to see the data that comes out of the next phase of it. I want to see us tackle the issue around commuter parking, and that needs more time. And from that point of view, I was quite happy to support it as a trial, to give it that decent period of time so we can work those three issues through. So I'm in a little bit of a different position than you, Mayor Andrew. And I have to say that, yes, it's election year, but
our decisions should be the right decisions, regardless of populist politics at this time. So if it's right for the trial to continue, it's right for the trial to continue for the rational reasons. I don't think we should be bringing electioneering into the chamber in that way. We've just got to weigh up the pros and cons. We won't always get it right. We won't always agree with each other. But we need to make our best effort to make the right decision with the information that what we've got. And that's what led me to the support that I lent to the proposition last week.
Councillor Jeff. Sorry, apologies. Councillor Dave.
That's right. I know you're trying to avoid me today.
Second time.
Yeah.
Sooner or later.
Look, it's sort of like Groundhog Day or deja vu all over again, as the famous American said. Where every second meeting we seem to be having a debate about this. So we've certainly some good speeches today because everyone's had so much practice speaking, and I don't know whether anyone's position has changed much during the time, but I'll give it another go. I just want to come back to some of Leo's points first. He talks about Access Hamilton, and he can't understand why we're making it easier for cars when we're supposed to be promoting cycling and buses. Access Hamilton does not say no cars. It says let's have a balance between cars, cycling, walking and buses. And in the very recent times, we've put in a major new cycle connection to the city, the Western Rail Trail. We're currently involved in other cycle connections to the CBD. And we've got a brand new bus connecting the CBD north and south, running at a high frequency. The first time we've ever had that started 3 days ago. So, you know, we're not ignoring this. All of those, cycling, walking, bus and parking, are all part of the CBD revitalisation improvements packages that we've been talking about, as are the DC remissions and a number of other things like that. And I think it was Mike Neal said the other day to us, no one thing is the whole answer, or might have been Vanessa, and that's absolutely true. But I think collectively what we've been doing has been working. As far as parking goes, definitely been working. The volume, the patronage has increased, the turnover has increased, the things that we were after. It's clearly strongly supported by CBD businesses, and they have said that in the future they're not opposed to paying some extra, and I think that's something I will certainly support being on, if I'm around, being on the next LTP discussions. What is the correct rate for CBD businesses to share in this, the costs of this? Lastly, this reference to the base being free, and thanks to James for actually getting that figure of $2 a day, which that's quite interesting. Nevertheless, the rates for businesses out of the base are much lower than in the city in most cases, certainly for proportional properties. The basic rate, forgetting about the parking charges, we have undercharged the base in big shopping centres like that for a long time. And that's why they've been able to afford to put in free parking and compete with the CBD. We haven't done it deliberately, we've done it inadvertently. So I think another thing about the free parking for 2 hours in the CBD is it's redress some of that imbalance. So overall, it's a good package, let's keep it going.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote. Staff recommendation.
The motion is carried, 9 for, 4 against.
Okay, we'll now go to page 98. Recommendation from the Community Services and Environment Committee. River Plan Task Force update. So no, I don't need it, it's all here. So we'll take that's from Paula, seconded by Councillor Jeff. Or do you want to go around the other way? Yep. Okay. So we'll go straight to the vote.
The motion is carried, 11 for, 1 against.
So we're now moving to page 99. Proposed development contributions policy. Thank you, Greg. So there are some amendments going up on the board on this. So, Greg, maybe if we get the amendments up, the motions up first, and then that will give you something to talk to. Yep. Okay. So you should have a hard copy on your desks.
Question.
Sure.
In terms of the annual plan report, budget report changes, because we've got the CBD remission proposal within that, and it's also here, wouldn't it be better to see if that part survives the annual plan first before we know whether we need to include it or not in this policy?
Sean?
Did you hear? Just on process, Sean, because the CBD remission proposal is within the annual plan report, would it be better to take that report first, so then we know whether that remission proposal survives or not before we go into adopting the policy?
No, the CBD remission is considered as part of the DC policy. So if you, so although we have assumed that the decisions we made on the 26th of February, we've assumed in terms of the annual plan budget, in terms of the decision that needs to be made today, you need to make a decision on what goes into the DC policy for consultation.
Okay.
So it's appropriate to do that first.
Okay, so if the policy goes through with the remission, then we don't need to be discussing it in the annual plan vote?
Correct.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So what's on the board is seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Well, you can still second it, you don't have to vote for it.
Should we take it motion by motion?
We are taking it motion by motion. So, okay. You normally would always, you've always traditionally seconded it, whether you've supported it or not, during the plan process. Yeah. Yeah, but remember we're in the annual plan process here, and that's what you've always done. That's why I've asked you.
As long as on the record for debate.
Okay.
Where's that fence? Well, you've got to worry about splinters, Councillor Day, not the fence.
Okay, so, Gregor, is there anything you want to add before we start moving through the motions?
Briefly. Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. I'll take the report as read. I'll just make several introductory comments before taking questions. This item seeks to approve a proposed development contributions policy for adoption for public consultation between the 8th and the 28th of April. Council will have the opportunity to consider feedback from that consultation period before adopting an updated development contributions policy, which would be effective 1 July. The impact of the recommended changes to Council's projected DC revenue, which is excluding the Rotokauri remission, which I can provide further information on, is $14.7 million positive for its projected revenue. I'm also aware of recent interest and discussion in reconciling a decision to reduce policy charges in a particular catchment and the apparent contradiction between that and Council's 10-year plan principle that growth should pay for growth. And a separate but related question is how the benefits of a CBD remission might be measured and to whom they accrue to. I'm happy to take questions on these or any other matters.
Councillor Robb.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is around paragraph 55 and 59 on page 105, where you're giving us an indication of what the loss in revenue might be if we reinstall the zero DCs in the city. How do you get 6.45 million in 2 years when in fact all we've collected over, or all we would have collected over 6 years, if I read this right, was 7.08 million? We presumably remitted 7 million over 6 years, but we're looking now at potentially losing 6.425 in 2 years. How do you reconcile that large loss of 6 million in 2 years when we only lost 7 in 6?
Thanks, Councillor. Several things play into that number. The first thing is that the 6 years of DC remissions is true. However, there was very little in the first 3 years before sort of developers really took advantage of this. So that's the first thing. What we're projecting as a baseline projection for CBD remissions is about $2.5 million a year. So that gets you closer to that $6.4 million number. The second key thing is that we know of, in particular, two substantial developments there that we expect, and so we've done some research work on that to try and make an estimate of that, and those two developments contribute $2.2 million to the total, and then obviously these are all phased, and following from Councillor O'Leary's point at the briefing, to add to be sure that we've taken into consideration when that money would be foregone versus when the remission is provided. Mm-hmm. And the third thing to remember is that this is the impact as compared to the current policy, which has a part remission in it. So that is, baked in, that is included in the baseline in those calculations. I think those three things together will bring you up to that number. So changing the timing of when the DC is charged to, as I understand it, to is it building permit time rather than consent time? Is that likely to affect this? Have you based this on when the building permit's going to be issued and the DC would have otherwise been paid? Because I would sense that beyond 2021, was it? Or whenever the DC full remission ceases, and consent may have already been granted for a development in the CBD, but the building hasn't started, that we would still collect DCs on that, because the start of the building or the building compliance time would have been post the remission? Am I making sense? Yeah. So you're referring to a prior resolution of council, which was to, in particular specific circumstances, council staff may consider deferring its assessment to building consent.
So that's not across the board then?
No, that was on a case by case and in unusual circumstances.
Okay, I thought we were changing it across the board. I know that we had some instances where it was potentially in our favour to change it, but I thought that we were actually going to move the DC time of payment from consent to, or section, whatever it is, section issue, section title issue to building.
So that resolution confirmed the staff's ability that it already had to make determinations of at which point, but separate to all of that, in the CBD, typically assessments are done on building consent because that's what comes in front of us. So in any case, that's precluded. So in any case, they are building consent, and the phasing that we've built into those numbers reflects when people are granted a building consent and then how they progress through and when we'd expect code of compliance. Yep. And at that point, the foregone revenue is recognised.
So how will we give certainty to developers of the timing of our charge for DCs?
It certainly is, as it is now, that it's...
That you can still change the timing of it?
Yeah, so we've always been able to change the timing. I mean, we've got a consistent approach. There's an indication in the policy. The policy says that we will assess development contributions at the first opportunity, and that stands. What we did in that meeting was we said, in a very unusual situation where council faces a substantial funding gap, was council happy for staff to take a various number of criteria under consideration, and if those criteria existed, then make a decision around when to collect. But again, that's in the 0.5 percentile of developments, and it won't apply to these CBD ones. So it's an important matter. But again, but specifically for CBD remission, I don't think it applies. So you can probably be sure that they do know that it's code of compliance for CBD developments.
Okay. Now, on the question on Rotokauri and the new motion, which am I right in you've told us that could potentially mean that 14.7 million of DCs will now be paid by residents citywide, by ratepayers citywide, rather than being charged specifically to the developers of residential property in Rotokauri? Is that my interpretation of that correct?
So what I'll say is about the projected DC revenue. So that's what our model determines.
Yep.
The staff resolution, the paper as presented, shows that with the changes proposed and some of them approved for the updated policy, that there's a $14.7 million net positive as far as projected DC revenue.
Okay.
And then in respect of the motions the Mayor has on the board, there is the impact of a non-residential cap at the amount stated up there is $8.9 million further. So that would mean if, for argument's sake, the council adopted the Rotokauri caps and the CBD remission and the balance of the policy, that forecast, the projected revenue would sit at 5.7 million positive.
Okay, so that's taking one away from the other, isn't it?
That's adding both of the impacts together and subtracting them from the total.
From the 14.7 million.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. All right. So there's no suggestion in here then that cap would extend to residential properties in Rotokauri?
It's non-residential's the proposal.
Yeah, okay. I know that's quite clear, but there isn't a suggestion that we would need to extend it to residential properties in Rotokauri?
I suppose that's if someone makes that motion. I'm not suggesting it, but I don't know how relevant that is. Richard,
at the moment this has been indicated by some of the development in respect of the commercial areas, so we haven't had the conversation with, we haven't had any more of a conversation with Rotokauri residential developers than any other developers in the city who are concerned with the DC amounts being higher than they were previously.
Does this create a precedent that by putting a cap on non-residential, that residential would follow?
Everything we do as a council and elected members, decisions they make, it establishes expectations, but we'll let you know whether or not it creates a legal precedent. It doesn't.
No, I'm not. You're talking about a legal precedent. I mean, you guys are working in that market. Are we likely to be pressured to do the same for residential property?
So, Councillor, in 2013, Council resolved to have non-residential caps across the city, and that was a policy decision. I think my view would be no. I mean, people can lobby for their preferences. Council, in making a determination about this Rotokauri cap, is to deal with a specific issue, and if you can do it in a way that's consistent with how the policy works, how the legislation works, so I would say there's no precedent risk. It's simply that an affirmative decision if that were to be made.
We will continually be pressured by the development community, Councillor Pascoe. I don't think it creates a precedent in that we've made this very clear that it's in relation to a certain sector that that this council has a right to try and support
Yep.
And that's what this is achieving.
Okay.
If we have significant pressure, in fact, some of the work that Greg's team's doing is looking at the impact of the increased development contributions over activity across the city. That may well come back to this council at a later stage and actually raise some questions about whether or not the current policy is actually achieving the outcomes we set to achieve, and that will then be another opportunity for you to retest this, Councillor Pascoe.
Okay. So through you, Chair, to the CEO, is this putting at risk one of our financial imperatives of growth paying for growth? And does this lead us down the slippery slope of what might follow, that growth is not paying for growth if we are prepared to make concessions to various groups when in fact council has previously indicated as part of its strategic financial plan that this would be the case, and the direction given then to staff to follow that is with a concession like this is potentially putting that financial imperative at risk?
So it was a principle that was established during the 10-year plan, and you know this more than anyone as you led the task force that brought that to the table, Councillor Pascoe. So that's a principle. That's been the underlying premise that we've built the 10-year plan around. But as a principle, there are always the opportunity for exceptions. It's this council's discretion whether or not they choose to create those exceptions to that rule. From a staff point of view, growth pays for growth, and everything we do, we push hard on that.
Yep.
So that will not change.
Will this create a testing time for staff? If we did agree to this concession today at Rotokauri, would that, and as well as the CBD remission, would that put at risk and puts, as far as staff are concerned, that as a governance group we're not following through with our agreed financial strategy?
It's no different to the CBD remission. The fact that we made a decision to not absolutely remove the remission straight away was a move away from growth pays for growth in that context. So we have created the expectation. What we have done, though, is we made sure we have these discussions as part of annual plans and 10-year plans. So it's not like we're bringing these back to you based on the ad hoc pressure we get from developers. We're saying there is a process here to be considered as part of the whole. And that whole, in this case, is an annual plan discussion. So if a developer attempts to place pressure on us to bring back a discussion outside a 10-year plan or annual plan round, I'll be very reluctant to do so because it's out of the full context of the impact of that on the financial strategy. So that's how I'm protecting us from a precedent point of view, is making sure we follow good process in this context. But
if I can help too, Richard, the financial principle that you're talking about, if you remember the financial strategy task force, it was about guiding financial principles. So it was a starting place of where we start looking at whether or not we can, in all cases, growth paying for growth. And I think what Richard's saying is that there are some occasions where there are other competing factors that might get us on a subset of issues away from that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will. Councillor Pascoe, I'll just make just a quick piece of information, I guess. As far as our principle of growth pays for growth, I'd say that we apply that quite strictly in as far as our recovery of costs to the growth community, which is a strict adherence to the principle. If we made no concessions whatsoever, so you'd consider that 100% growth pays for growth, I guess, which would be no CBD remission, no caps, which are the only two that we're currently talking about. You get to 100%. With the CBD proposal, you go down to 98%, and with the if the Rotokauri caps as proposed, you go down to about 96% growth pays for growth. So whilst we're challenging in the purest sense the growth pays for growth, we should also realise that 96% recovery of growth pays for growth, and the 4%, and if you agree with it, is to deal with specific issues that are causing other problems. So, in one case it's the realising some benefits, and the other one is to deal with an anomaly. So you can make those decisions. My personal view is it's not inconsistent, but in any case, it's a minor change.
Thank you, that's a good explanation.
Okay, I'll just take the last of the questions and we'll stop for a cup of tea, and then we'll come back and go into debate. So, Councillor Angela.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. Thanks, Greg, for your report. I found it very easy to read and I understood all of it. So I really appreciate your work on that. Actually, a really simple question from me, which is actually on process. On page 101, 101? Yes, point 17. In the list there, it doesn't talk to us providing a hearings process for submitters. It just says that staff will analyse and then come to us in a briefing. Is there a reason for that? I mean, this is a formal consultation process, not just engagement.
Yeah, sure. Sean or Natalie, could you help with that, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no, I guess, legal obligation to have a hearings process. So it's not a question of kind of what we have to do. So it's really just determining what the most appropriate method of consultation is. I understand that this is that for some of these items there'll be a reasonably kind of targeted audience in the development community, and then there's I guess the broader view of the public, and it didn't. I think the conclusion from the team was that having a hearings process wasn't required as part of that.
Yeah, I do have a concern about that, given the audience and the stakeholders that we are dealing with. So is that the reason also why we're only giving them 3 weeks to submit instead of 4? Because we do actually say in here that we're in the consultation document, which was really clear, that we're instructing readers to look at the policy in its entirety. So we haven't given them a whole lot of detail. I think we will come under fire if we don't have 4 weeks in a hearings process, given the audience. That's just my advice. Up to the group, obviously. And Andrew, I'll be proposing an amendment for your D, which yes. I think is the transition for CBD remission. And my amendment would simply be the staff recommendation, which would be on page 99, which is B Roman numeral 4, the introduction of a full remission of DC, blah, 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 to 2021. And of course, I understand this goes out for consultation.
Councillor Paula.
Actually, some of the questions have been asked, but just to follow up on a couple. With the cap on the road to Tuna development, as you say, it does, Rotokoti, we're applying it to the industrial land, not to the residential, and you said potentially it could be broadened out. My question about that is, the industrial land's already serviced, isn't it? It's already ready to go, whereas the residential would be more problematic because the services are not in place. Is that a fair comment, or am I off?
I think generally speaking, that's right. Chris does have any other comment on that, or no? You ain't listening. That the residential in Rotokari is not serviced compared to the industrial park, Porter's HJV area, which is? Yeah.
So really, by capping the industrial park, we're giving them the opportunity to get some more cash flow and get cracking with development. It would be a slightly more problematic and different scenario should we want to be favourable to getting residential growth in Rotokoti going, which we might want to, but it'll be a different thing, right?
It's different. And I think yeah, that's right. So if you take a deeper dive into it, the non-residential sectors feel the effect further, but it's amplified because there's conversion factors in there, say 3.6 for water versus 1 for a house. So it makes the effect amplified. The second thing is that in the residential area, there isn't growth happening in the next few years. There's not going to be an accelerated growth because the solution, being the swale, is going to take longer than that. So, council said there are many opportunities to address that issue, but here we're really talking about an acute issue that has manifested because of the anomaly of the highest charges in the country. And secondly, the industrial growth cell is, the oil is gushing, the money is there to be made, it's service, there's demand for it. And so I think part of the theory is that whilst that is the environment, you want to make sure that you're not just impeding growth from happening where you've enabled that growth to occur. So I think we're dealing with that issue because that's the one right in front of us.
Yeah, I just
That's the
wanted
maturity of that growth cell as well. So the industrial growth cell, as Greg's saying, is more mature. And so this is about the opportunity to actually continue with what's going on, the momentum that already exists.
But yes, I agree. So, but if we in the future should feel that we want to give some impetus to Rotokauri to get cracking, to get more growth in the city, then we could look at this kind of mechanism at that time, preferably when the swale was able to be delivered.
So you can look at this at any stage. I recommend throwing a 10-year plan or an annual plan phase. Right, so that's the base premise. The other aspect is to look at the quantum of development that's going to occur, and the impact financially here would be a lot less than the potential amount that would have to cap for a residential rate DC as well.
That was going to be my next question.
Because the quantum there will be a lot larger as well in absolute amount. Because it's really what this comes down to is that for a significant portion of Rotokauri, the ability to actually deliver cost-effective solutions is restricted by the nature of the soil and the topology of the land.
I appreciate that. It just might be that at some stage we want to
and you
tap
can do that,
into the potential
absolutely.
that really is Rotokauri. Just another question on the industrial land before one on the CBD. When we were having our debate and the last time we touched this topic a couple of weeks ago, I was still confused as to why this land is the most expensive land in the country. Is that because of the proactive nature of some proactive nature of some of our neighbours in opening up their industrial land, so people have got choices, or why exactly is it the most expensive development land, industrial development land?
So several basic reasons. The first is a comparison in that we capped our charges at the 2013 rate for 5 years, so we're sitting at a very low base. The second thing is that the amount of capex in Rotokauri, say for example transport, was 20 million in the 16-17 policy and it's 55 million now, so that's nearly triple the amount of capex, and that just leads to a near tripling of the charge. And those two factors alone will push you right up there. Council's conversion factors in its model are, and also have the amplifying effect, and as a consequence, highest charges.
So one of the aspects is when council decided to zone this area, this was under a significant amount of pressure from the development community in that space to actually achieve this. We made a decision to do it, so the council has some responsibility, but ultimately the cost of servicing that land and the economic viability of that land is a question whether that should sit with the developers that own that land or with the community. And the policy to date has been that it sits with the developers based on a fair split through the development contribution policy. If council believes that they want to promote this over and above, that then is your question is whether or not you shift that to the rate-paying community. And it is one of the most expensive pieces of land to develop on, given the sheer nature of what it was. The question now, in hindsight, looking back on it, given that the quantum of the capital required to unlock this land, is whether or not we should have gone ahead with it in the first place. But they always say once horses bolted, it's very hard to put it back in.
So that was going to be my question. If this investment, this area had been allowed to go ahead, you'd invested sooner, we wouldn't have had this growth in those costs that led it to be. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not about the timing, it's about the sheer decision to invest in it, because it's the nature of that land is effectively, it's wet, and it's wet all year round.
Right, so now we're getting to it. So you're saying it's actually because it's expensive land to turn into hard land for industrial.
Yep. We need to invest a significant amount of money to bring it to a suitable form to enable industrial development and residential development to occur in that area.
That's right, and we decided that was an industrial node, however, didn't we, sometime prior?
Yep, there are different compaction rates for industrial versus residential, and that might lead to different solutions, but ultimately you need to move the water around somehow, and I suggest that's not going to change too much in terms of the cost of developing out there.
Right, so we have confidence that if we cap these development contributions now, we have confidence that the developers will go ahead and develop on that land, I presume.
That will be their choice. I've had several meetings with them, and one of the meetings included Richard, and they, at the moment, it's not affordable for them. It's, there was one factory that I saw out there recently that I was at the opening at, and for that factory to be rebuilt, the DCs on that were going to be $1 million.
No,
just for DCs.
I understand that, but I guess we're after the outcome, which is if we do this, does it give us the outcome we want, which is to get more industrial growth?
Anecdotally, we cannot. There's other factors that, and we've heard that a number of times from a number of people over the years. There are other factors that drive development decisions.
Yeah.
But we're doing everything we can. Ultimately, we're not going to do more than that. We're not going to require them to develop. We can't. But we can create a fora for them to progress from our perspective.
So, and I'll just add to that. So our research, and this is really a question of feasibility, is that at the current level that those charges are in Rotokauri, that they effectively so high that they push through into, I think, creating real problems for some developers in terms of feasibility. I think that's pretty clear. We had the economic report last year, which effectively said that as well, and that seems to have borne itself out. I think the other thing to consider is if you do price people out, then where do they go? So basically in Hamilton, our two live industrial growth areas are infill Te Rapa and the Rotokauri catchment that we're talking about. So there's limited substitutes, and we know that our DCs in Rotokauri currently are 5 times higher than in Northgate, just over the boundary. So we run the risk of stranding infrastructure or delaying development and having, flight risk to the neighbours. So that's a consideration. And then the consideration of now we're going to incentivise people to actually go ahead and do the development because they've moved into that feasibility zone. Yeah. And from what I understand about the mechanics of this, and my understanding is yes, that it will make a positive difference and to take off the extreme highs.
Thank you, and I understand that, and we're actually trying to stem the flight risk that's already occurred. I mean, we're already seeing flight of industry heading up the road into the Waikato district, aren't we? And then we do have Ruakura also, but that's until the road is completed. I understand that also has some feasibility.
So that's future industrial, I think, would be fair to call it. And we're really dealing with, mostly when we make these, we being the elected members make these decisions, they're sort of 3-year decisions or increments of 1 year because these topics come up. So I think in 3 years' time, that Rotokauri and Te Rapa North will still be your predominant industrial cells. So we do we want to take an intervention here or not? That would,
thank you.
That's what I'd suggest.
Makes clear. And that's the reason we have more than 3-year growth infrastructure plans, isn't it? And looking into the 30-year horizon for infrastructure plans, not 3. Just on the CBD one, because we had HCBA here this morning, and I asked them this question. Just want to get your perspective on it. For how much? I know it's best guess on what you know is likely to happen in the CBD. For how long do you think they will need the additional support they're seeking now in the CBD to? I know it's how long's a piece of string, but I asked them the same question. So out of fairness, I'd like to kind of get a sense of what our staff feel. I mean, we're looking 3, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. What does it look like to turn the CBD into a more vibrant?
Look, I think fundamentally it comes down to what the policy is trying to achieve in the CBD, and then it's about measuring the impact of that policy over time to a point at which this group feels that what they wanted to achieve in that area has in fact come to fruition. So I guess for me, it's not really about a date. It's about actually being really clear about what our vision for the central city is, and then having those policies in place that support that, but taking them off once we've got what we need. So
because the options before us today, one has is as it was before, and the other one has a date in it, the 3 years. That's what you're proposing making, I think, the 3 years slide to taking the remissions off. But what you're saying there is that you would measure the outcomes, and when you were achieving the outcomes, then you would put your stop date on. Is that what you're saying?
No, well, so on the basis, that we have a plan and that we know what we're trying to achieve and we're stepping towards that, putting some timeframes around that, helps to encourage that process.
Right.
And what we have seen is that there has been improvements in the CBD, and that we are starting to see residential development in the city, and the kinds of things that policy was put in place to do is starting to happen.
So having an end date can be useful because it gives people a little bit of an incentive to get cracking, perhaps, potentially. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Last questions, councillor Mark, and then we're stopping, and then we're coming back to go straight into debate.
Fantastic, thank you.
This is the wrapping up the questions for debate when we come back.
Yep, thank you. Just following on, Jen, from your answer there about how you're seeing stuff starting to happen in the CBD, residential, etc. The argument that we were putting in the last debate about this was that we'll drop off if the emissions keep creeping up. Can you tell me, even anecdotally, if that's the case, or in your mind?
So, well, anecdote. I mean, Mike Neal was here this morning, and he told that story.
Yeah.
And he's pretty close to the community, so I would just rely on his feedback on that. I mean, yeah.
But have we seen a drop off in demand in the last year? Yeah.
I don't believe that the numbers actually bear that out at the moment.
Okay. And look, this is a bit of a finger in the wind, Greg. This one's aimed at you. You've seen Mayor King's proposal here with regards to the CBD emissions, sliding it out over 9 years as opposed to 3. Roughly, do you have any idea of how much that would cost us, or set us back, or we'd have to...
I believe the proposal is to similar. Would be a very short answer. It's to take longer to provide that remission, but if you're aggregating it up, then aside from the cost of money, I think it's a similar impact.
Right.
But I haven't done the work on that.
But over that length of time, we expose ourselves to a lot more market fluctuations, I presume. And
well, hang on. At the moment, the proposal on the board is no DC remissions and is 100% DC remissions in the CBD.
Yes.
So your question needs to be based on that as the baseline, not, I don't know where you're coming from, but the baseline is 100% remissions on the CBD. Mark's asking you to compare it with the proposal that's on the board.
So it's my mistake.
Sorry.
Demir's right. The baseline is what the current policy has.
Yep.
Demir's recommendation or proposal is to effectively take that and stretch it out.
Yep.
And the staff recommendation is to have 100% remission. So the simple answer is no effect for the Mayor's recommendation and 6.425 million for the staff recommendation.
Okay.
Yep, sorry about that.
No, I get that. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. I'm done.
Yeah, okay, we'll stop for a cup of tea and we'll be back at 4:10. We'll be back at 4:15. 3:15, sorry. Yes, sure.
Will we be debating each motion, or will it be wrapped up as one?
Each motion will go through.
Okay.
Soon.